So what I'm going to try and do tonight is talk a little bit of the brutal truth, some science and then some answers, and it's going to be the science because I think that climate policy in Australia is actually delusionary. The way it's constructed in public, delusion being fixed false belief that is resistant to reason or confrontation with actual fact. And my experience of that is precisely what's happening because the debate is not science-based. It is not based on fact. It is based on what is politically convenient, and that has occurred because those engaged in the policy debate, and I think some of my friends in the large green organisations have actually strategically decided to advocate what seems incrementally reasonable to government rather than what is necessary. So we have delusionary behaviour. Some of you, as old as me, will know this Monty Python story, which we'll come back to. Our emissions are going more quickly than the most conservative estimates of the climate scientists. In just before 2000, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change did a whole lot of scenarios, which are the various lines of where emissions would go. The most conservative one is the red one called business as usual, which is doing nothing. And some of the others about where emissions were going were based on behaving a bit better. And yet, the data shows, and I have to say the 2007 one I've just come up is in the same line, our emissions are now worse than the most pessimistic scientific assumptions. And so even the last IPCC report last year, which was based on these emissions, is just not relevant because we've gone past it. And we have to look at a new science that actually deals with what's going on. It's interesting that so much new science has come out on sea level rises and so on in the last 2 or 3 years, because the cut-off point for the last IPCC report was 3 years ago. The report came out last year, but the research cut-off point was in 2005. So everything that's happened in the last 3 years, including the disappearance of the Arctic, is just not in the science. And it was interesting the number of green groups met with Senator Wong a month or so ago, and there was a long discussion where she berated them for not loving clean coal, and then they recovered from that. One of them said, "Do you think your adaptation policy might need to be reviewed in the light of the post-IPCC or the recent science?" And her answer was, "I pride myself on being on top of my portfolio and my briefs, and I do not know what you are talking about." So tonight I'm going to talk to you about some post-IPCC science, the science that we might say is above the line. A couple of charts. You can close your eyes and listen to the words. If they go up towards the right, the news is bad. They all go up towards the right, except the ice one, which goes down. Our methane emissions, the green line, are 150% higher than they've been. That's 500,000 years going back, drawn out of ice core data. Our methane emissions are up 150%. Our carbon dioxide emissions are up 40%, the blue line. And we are going to somewhere we have not been since humans walked this planet. And yet temperature down the bottom doesn't seem to have gone up much, and the reason is that there's inertia in the system. There's actually a delay between putting these forcings in the climate system and the response. So for the present level, if we stopped emissions tomorrow, those blue and green lines just flattened, didn't go up one more atom, there would still be another 2 degrees of warming, which would take us to a place where humans have never been, and this planet hasn't been for 1 million years, because we're within 1 degree of the top, and we've got another 2 degrees to go. So we're going to go to somewhere we've never been, which is a very dangerous and not risk-averse thing to do. What we're pouring up there at an increasing rate, carbon dioxide is measured in parts per million. It's gone up 30 parts per million in the last 17 years. In that previous million years, 30 parts per million had never taken less than 1,000 years. So what nature took 1,000 years to do, coming out of ice ages, we did in 17 years. So we're now pushing the climate system 60 times faster than nature has done, which means it's just going to run all over us just by the speed of change. The climate is warming. It's about 0.8 average around the world, hardly over the oceans because the oceans are great sinks. More over land, as you can see, and more at the poles. And because most of the land is in the northern hemisphere, the greatest warming is at the North Pole, where you can see the brown, which is over 2 degrees of warming so far. And that, of course, tells a little story which will cascade through very quickly. At the North Pole, on the right is Greenland, an ice sheet, a large ice block, 1,000 kilometres by 2,000 kilometres by 2 kilometres high, 2,000 metres high. Enough ice is melted to raise the seas by 7 metres. To the left is the Arctic sea ice, the Arctic Ocean. That area without Greenland is about the size of Australia, 8 million square kilometres, and it is melting fast. So that used to be extent in summer. You can see the purple line, that's the average extent. That was 2005, that was 2007, and it's been just above that this year. The ice in summer is now down to half the extent it was. It's also become much thinner. So altogether by volume, now this September, 80% of the ice that used to be there in summer is gone. And it is on a decline, and within 5 years, the scientists say, there will be no ice in the Arctic in summer, because it's getting thinner and there is a progression that you can't stop. It gets thinner, it's not multi-year ice, it's melting more quickly. It's going, it's gone. Now that's interesting for a number of reasons. The first is, almost finished the charts, this is going off to 2100 on the right. The line across the top is no sea level loss, and the red line represents the IPCC predictions of how that sea ice would decline. They said it would decline slowly over 100 years. By 2100, it would be almost gone. The bad news, which I think you can probably guess, is that the black line represents what's actually happened. And so the projections are that the ice will be gone in 2013. As one IPCC scientist said, 100 years ahead of schedule. But I think nature was right on schedule and science were 100 years behind schedule, but that's another story. It is gone, and this has devastating consequences. It's interesting that the head of the WWF Arctic program, the WWF is a fairly conservative climate and environment organisation, gave a speech, a presentation at the Academy of Science in Canberra in May, where he talked about the Arctic. And he says the Arctic ecosystem is being destroyed, it will not be there much longer. And then he said something which I've never forgotten. You know, people occasionally say something that just sort of sticks in your head forever. And he said, we, the WWF, are no longer trying to protect the Arctic ecosystem because it is no longer possible to do so. So we, in our climate change, have already destroyed one of the great ecosystems of the world. Which leads to this conclusion given by a very eminent American climate scientist, a meeting of 15,000 climate scientists in December last year. And to come back to our initial slide, maybe it wasn't a canary, maybe it was a Norwegian blue. And the delusion is that we are trying to convince ourselves that the canary in the Arctic is still alive, when in fact they've already killed it. Come on, it's not dead. And the fact is that I do not know a single politician from either, I don't know whether the National Party is a major party anymore, I don't know a single politician from the major political parties who will even accept the facts of the Arctic, who will speak these words in public at all. It is as if it isn't happened. The fact that we've destroyed one of the Earth's Arctic system is not part of the public discussion. It's delusionary. Why does the Arctic matter? Because on Greenland, the 7 metres of sea level rise, and the debate is this: when all that Arctic ice goes, the Arctic will increase in temperature by about 5 degrees, because light reflecting ice is being reflected by dark sea, which absorbs the heat really quickly. There's about 5 degrees of regional temperature rise in the Arctic will happen when that Arctic sea ice is gone in summer. It'll be back in winter, but then it's dark and it doesn't matter. So the debate now is about how quickly Greenland will melt. Not if it will melt, that debate is over. When it will melt. And the view is that its collapse will take somewhere between 100 and 300 years. So James Hansen, the great American climate scientist, says Could happen in 100 years. We could see 5 metre sea level rise in 100 years. The others are saying 300. There's some new work published last week which now says that they think the maximum rate of Greenland will be 2 metres of sea level rise this year. Which is interesting because the IPCC report last year said that they thought sea level rises would be well under a metre to 2100, which are disputed. And in Victoria, talking about this afternoon, a whole lot of work was done by CSIRO for local councils based on adaptations of half a metre of sea level rise to 2100. And now the penny's dropped. That it's been too conservative, and it will be metres. I mean, Will Stephan, the most senior climate scientist in America, Coast to Coast in Darwin 4 weeks ago, said half a metre to a metre is guaranteed. I think it's 1.5 to 2, could be 4. And the people I talk to, a lot of them say, yeah, look, 2's pretty much where we think it's 2's would be our best guess, but 4 to 5 metres